sometimes your clients don't know what they want, right? So they may say something like, I want this vast space for my thing and blah, 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 blah. And then at the same, 5 minutes they say, I want something cozy. So that's a contradiction, right? And as a designer, in your head, you're thinking, I can't make things vast and open and cozy at the same time, but maybe I can when you need clarification. So when you call your clients out on contradictions with tone, now watch this. One way to do it is, well, Mr. Jones, that makes no sense. You say you want big and vast, and now you want cozy. I'm confused. Like, you can't have one or not the other. Like, you're going to have to pick. So tell me what's up. It's one tone, right? Which you may be thinking. The other tone would be curious. Josh, you said you wanted big and vast, and then you also said you wanted cozy. What does that look like for you in the same space if you could have both of them? Curious. Gotcha. So that tone is calling your clients out on a contradiction because maybe they just don't know. They don't know.
Welcome to the Sales Made Simple podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping overwhelmed outdoor living professionals, landscapers, and hardscapers just like you increase your closing rate to over 75% without doubling your workload so you can build a 7-figure business that doesn't need you. I'm your host, Joshua Gillow. Let's dig in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Dan Bai's back with us this week, and we're going to unpack the number one communication technique that can land you a ton more new sales and increase your customer buy-in. So Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. These are fun, man.
Yeah, I'm loving this too, man. I love talking about this stuff. It's good stuff. So today, what we're going to dig deep into. Last week, we jumped into this whole idea of how talking too much as a salesperson is killing your closing rate, because you're neglecting your client's needs. So if you haven't heard that podcast, go back. We talk about a lot of stuff about talking less and selling more, all of that. So if you haven't heard it, go back and take a listen. But this week, we're going to focus on tonality. This sounds like one of those goofy, whimsical unicorn things that you're like, yeah, tonality, what the hell? Like, I don't have time to learn about that stuff. But I have to tell you, listeners, there is gold in understanding and being aware of the tonalities that you're using when you're working with clients. And Dan, I've never met anybody better at it than Dan. And he understands how to open clients up faster and not manipulative or anything like that, but honest curiosity so that the client can truly share what's on their heart so we can take them to the result faster, more efficiently, and more perfectly, if you will. So, yeah. Dan, I'd love for you to jump into here, talk us a bit about tonality, what it is, and why we should care.
Okay. Well, before we get into the nuts and bolts on tonality, I do want to speak to the people in the back of the room who are probably thinking, that's not authentic. I should just use the tone that I normally speak in all the time. I don't want to be someone I'm not. And I'm sharing this because this was my biggest hang up about tone. I always felt like, I'm not an actor. If I wanted to be an actor, I would have been an actor, I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not. If I'm not that particular tone, I don't want to do it. And so I had a lot of hang-ups with that in the beginning, and I just wanted to share that with everyone in the room who was listening, who may be struggling with the same thing. And to that, I want to say this. We play roles. We have roles in our life that are different for each particular portion of our existence. For example, I am a son, right? I am a father. I am a husband. I am a doctor. I am a consumer. I am a coach. I have many different roles in my life, and I think everyone that's listening plays at least more than one role. I don't speak to my wife the same way I speak to my clients. I don't speak to my clients the same way I speak to my sons. I don't speak to my sons the same way I speak to Josh, right? I have different roles. So when we're talking about tone, I want everyone to understand we're just trying to play the role as a trusted advisor for something that our clients need, want, and desire. And that requires a certain level of tone, a different way we speak to them. And so if you ever have a hang up about trying to establish a different tone, understand it's still very authentic, right? Even though you speak differently to your spouse than your kids, it doesn't make you a different person. It just makes you actually more of a sensitive person because your tone is matching the relationship, and it's actually respecting that other party, not disrespecting them, okay? So number one, I need to put that out there because if there's any hangups about tonality, I just want you to put it behind you right now. Second thing about tone is the role, the tonality. And Josh, you said it beautifully in the last episode, is the tonality of detective, curiosity, leaving space. In the last episode, we talked about STF viewing. That's a tone. It's something that we need to establish in order for the other party to share with us their deepest and darkest, because it's the only way we're going to serve them at the level that y'all want to serve them at. So I just want to start there with tonality because I struggle with this a lot, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone listening, you don't have the same issues. It took me a while to get over it, and I just wish I got over it a lot quicker because I'd be way ahead of the game more if I didn't struggle with this. But I think that's where we should start if you wanted to.
No, for sure. And, your struggle is very similar to my struggle where, at times I can be a bulldozer when I'm working with contractors or I'm working with, employees or whatever it might be in the past. It was like, you got to show up as the leader, have all the answers, be direct, be curt, be, always thinking 12 steps ahead. But then you bring that same role, that same character home to your wife. It doesn't work. Tried it. It doesn't work. Right. And it's like that you have to come home with more of a tenderness and understanding and all that. And then you go and meet with your brother or your brothers or your buddies. And the next thing you know, it's a different role, but it doesn't make you inauthentic. I don't want to clarify and galvanize that.
Yeah.
To Dan's point, it doesn't make you inauthentic. It's not like you're trying to manipulate or trying to be somebody you're not. You just understand because you're aware of the environment, aware of how you're going to be best, how you can best guide is by understanding where that client is. You don't want to come into a room where the client's very quiet and timid and be pounding on tables and jumping around and pounding your chest. Like that would be an extreme example of how you are not aware of the tonality of your environment. If you want to meet people and you want to help serve them, you're going to have to meet them where they are, not where you want them to think you are or how you always are. Like you've got to take a little bit of slice of humble pie and realize you've got to read the room. You got to understand what that means. And if you're going to be successful in sales and serving people, you're going to need to get really, really good at that. Understanding, we can go into a whole episode about body language and mirroring and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother episode there. But in general today, I'd like to focus on tonality, Dan. So walk us through some of that tonality, how you teach your students, and maybe even some examples if you have them on top of them.
Sure. The role, obviously, you got to read the room, but I think as a general rule of thumb across all industries in terms of at least the initial interaction, any sales interaction, and the best I've seen in any industry is what used to be called consultative sales, consult, okay? Now it's probably more evolved into curiosity sales, clarification sales, probing sales. So what that sounds like is, and I think Josh, you brought up the analogy last time, like what does a doctor look like when he's trying to diagnose a problem? You know what I'm saying? Where the subjective, what the person is feeling and thinking, right? And the historical, what's happened in the past is critical for you to figure out how to proceed. We've all been in those roles before, right? Where we're not sure exactly what happened. And think about a detective on the scene of a crime. Like, what's the approach, right? Okay, so when you first did this and you arrived here, let me ask you a question. Like, what was the first 2 or 3 things that happened as soon as that event occurred? Got it. Understood. Well, hold on a second. Go back. What happened then after that? Was there anything that happened between there? Got it. So the tonality is incredibly curious, incredibly clarifying. Now we can relate this to what this looks like and sounds like between you and your potential client. And I'm sure Josh has great examples, but from a grand scheme of things, and I'm a big picture guy, so we really got to start from the big picture. What's the tonality? The reason why that tonality is so critically important is because if you assume that tonality of curious, clarifying, probing, getting more specific, understood, got it, what that creates is this reverse vacuum of information towards you as opposed to you being the one that's throwing information back at them. We need this to go in this direction toward us, right? Not you the one that's blowing air out. We need to suck it in. Only way to do that is with tone, applied with skilled questions that hopefully we're going to be sharing throughout the entire podcast, or at least Josh will, in order to create that. Okay, if you study like any type of physics, it's like we want that equilibrium, and you want them to be sharing as much more than you're sharing with them. The only way to do that is to curious, clarifying, probing questions. And that's the tone, at least initially. And I think later on, the tone changes when you become the person who has all the information, that has the answer. That becomes more of an expert authority tone. Maybe we'll have time for that on the end of the call.
You're spot on with that. And if you go in there, like I mentioned before, pounding your fist saying, this is how we're going to do it. This is how I've always done it. That's a wonderful line in the industries, right? It's like, this is how I always do it. So you just got to have to get used to that.
Yeah.
And that's just your fastest way to get kicked out of that entire possibility of closing that sale all day long, right? So, when it comes to this, specifically in our world, if we're meeting a client and they said, hey, they sent in an intake form and we've had a call with them, initial call, we know that we're on the same page. We've done a discovery call. We've dug deeper. We've talked to both decision makers. Like, we're really getting everything nailed down so that when we go out and spend time with them, that we're ready, they're ready, we're prepared, their expectations are set. Now it's time to be that. And throughout this whole process, it's a matter of being that detective. Don't ever think that you know more than they do. You may, because you're the expert in your field, but you don't know how to deploy that asset yet, your abilities yet, until you understand what the target is. It's like most of us, and I used to do this, and I can speak out to this, I was blindfolded when it came to sales. Like, you put a blindfold on me, I had one shot in a gun, I did one thing, and that's what it was. And every time I'd miss the target, and sometimes I would hit the edge of the paper, and then I'd get a project. But be honest, hitting the middle was tough for me because I was going in thinking that it was a performance, and I had to be the one in charge, and it really pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And it really turned them away from what we could do as far as service goes. And I was just thinking sales back then. I wasn't aware enough to understand this whole concept of service. But when I finally made that turn and became that detective or that doctor trying to figure out the best path forward, it changed everything. When one of our questions that we ask, it's and I mentioned this in the other episode, was, all right, guys, let's pretend it's a year from now and your new deck, pool, patio, whatever it might be. Let's just call it a new deck is put in. It's a beautiful summer morning. You open up those gorgeous patio doors and walk out into this new space. What does the space have to look and feel like for you both to know that this project was an absolute success, right? STFU, silence, baby. And you let them talk. And you're going to have the more creative one. It's probably going to start talking about things like comfort and cozy and maybe some spatial stuff. And often, not always, but oftentimes that's the feminine. And the masculine's more like, yeah, I want a patio, something that I can barbecue on, and more, more framed out. And that's okay. It's a beautiful combination of things. So now you have the choice. If you're still that detective, you say, wait a minute here. Okay, you told me that you want, Mrs. Jones, you mentioned that you wanted something that was cozy outside. So, and if I stop right there as a designer, sidebar, if I stop as a designer right now and said, okay, she wants something cozy and comfy outside, and he wants a patio X by Y like he told me, and I give him that, that's what every other contractor has done, because they're not equipped enough yet to ask next level questions. So then beyond that, they just gave us two big softballs,
Right.
Comfy and cozy. They are softballs. Like, as a designer, I don't know what that means. I know what it means for me, but Dan, is it my backyard? It's not my backyard.
Right.
So why does it matter what I think? So now, as a detective, I would say, okay, Mrs. Jones, you mentioned comfortable outside. What does that look like for you outside?
Curious.
And she will start talking. Curious, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then she might say something like, well, you know what? I was really thinking like 2 club chairs and a little table I could put my glass of wine on so I could watch the sunset. We bought this house because of this gorgeous sunset over the lake, and we want to make sure every night we can come out, hold hands, and watch the sun go down, right? And of course, as a designer, I'm like, I know exactly what this design is going to look like now because I know they need at least this, and there's going to be a lot more questions. Okay, great. You also mentioned cozy. Can you tell me what cozy means for you outside? Well, I was thinking those club chairs, there'd be a couple of blankets on it, maybe some footstools so I can kick back. My leg, I've got arthritis in my knee really bad, so it helps when I kick my knee up and hold it on top. The other one's kind of down. It's the most comfortable way I can sit.
Oh.
And I'm like, think about it, listeners. Think about it. When you go back to the design table, guess what you're going to picture? Guess what you're going to design for that client?
Can I stop right there? Guys, like, here in the past 2 minutes, Josh just pretty much gave it away, and that's why Josh is the professional in this. And I'm listening to this from the perspective of a customer, right? And if someone asked me that, and oh my God, so good. What does cozy look like for you? That's called a clarifying question with curiosity. What does cozy look like for you? Now, Josh probably already knows what cozy looks like, right? But he's asking me what cozy looks like for me. Yeah, I want a club chair with a blanket, with a footstool. Holy crapola. Do you guys all understand just that mere question? Now, Josh's going to go back. Oh, I have arthritis in my knees. Are you kidding me? If you get a client to share with you things like that, people, game over. This is what sales is about. We talked about this before, and I have to stop you right here. The sales is part of the service. Your client just shared with you their deepest and darkest in terms of what cozy looks like. I want to look at the sunset. I want to share a memory with my spouse with my feet up from my bum knee. Oh, are you kidding me? Now, fast forward. Wouldn't it be great during the presentation phase of this, when you're presenting your design, right? A part of that is even just a little element about the bum knee. You know, Sally, I know you have arthritis in your knees. I hope you're getting treated for that. I wish you the best. But just in case, what I've done in this design is to make sure you don't have any awkward step downs, okay? So that, you're probably not going to fall, but it's just going to decrease the likelihood of you just stepping off a curb wrong, because sometimes an awkward step can actually do, I don't know. I'm not a designer, guys. I don't really know. But that's what I would love to bring to the presentation phase. Why? Mm-hmm. Because you had the tone of, sure. I'm just curious, like, what does cozy look like for you? Oh, you shut it down right now. I mean, this is for free? Seriously? I can't believe this. I mean, this is what we're talking about, folks. And this is the stuff that just catapults you from, every other knucklehead out there who thinks they know how to sell. People who are hanging out here on these podcasts, learning how to do it the right way. Good stuff, Josh. Man, that's so good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And it's so powerful to know what's driving them. And to your exact point, if she had mentioned she has arthritis in her knee and she has a hard time with steps, do you think that we're going to design her a patio with 37 steps out of the back door down to the patio? Yeah. Just because that's the only thing in our repertoire, we only solve problems with paving stones and in blocks? Like, no, that's not the answer. The answer is simple. If you want to serve Mrs. Jones in this scenario, you're going to need to come up with something that we like to call a seamless transition. How do you get from the first floor of the house out to that space with no steps, so that bum knee doesn't inhibit her for using the space? It's when we miss those points, when we think about how's the customer perspective of prospect. You taught me that. How does this customer, how do they use it? Let's future pace this. Let's understand what this space has to look, feel like for them to use it, to be comfortable, to use it every day. What is that? And for everybody, it's different. And we need to take our time, not be chasing 10 out of 10 leads, but our goal is to get it down to 3, 4, or 5 that are solid, so we can spend the time to ask these questions, that we don't feel rushed that we've got 9 other people to talk to today, so everybody gets 15 minutes of my time. You're never going to get to this depth with that. The clients are going to feel rushed. Your tonality is going to be of go fast, maybe I can get enough, and maybe 3 of those 10 on average are going to close, so I'm okay with that. Imagine a world, Dan, my ultimate objective with Yes Express is for the outdoor living landscape and hardscape world to see a 75+% closing rate as a standard. As a standard.
Yep.
And to see guys that are closing 90, 95% or 100% of their work. That is my goal. That is the mission that God's put in my heart. And that's why I do this podcast, is to share stuff like this with people today, like we're talking about. Because each one of these little tools or thoughts or understandings has propelled us in our own outdoor living practice to be able to hit that 90 to 100% close rate. And if we can do it, everyone else can do it too. It's just a matter of learning these lessons and not just watching what the guy down the street did or how your grandpap used to do it. That was a different world he lived in. Yeah. The world today, that our buyers are much more sophisticated. They have everything they need on a little glass box in their pocket. They're asking their people, who's the best? What's going on here? This is a world now, specifically post-COVID. It's a world where people are starting to rely on people more. Yes, social media, all that's out there, but if they're going to spend 6 figures, they're going to ask a neighbor, a friend, a family member, a coworker, hey, you just had a backyard done. How did they do? Well, this guy showed up and told me what I needed. He came, he was late, he's overpriced. He was your typical contractor.
Yeah.
Dan, are you going to hire that guy?
No way, man. No way.
Hell no.
No way.
Hell no. So what you're going to do is when they say, hey, like, how was that experience for you? And you say, this guy sat down with us for like 30, 45 minutes and just asked us these questions. And He didn't put on a performance. He just asked us. And after that, we felt like he understood us. And when he finally did this design, when she brought the design back and showed it to us, we felt like we were in the design.
Yeah.
We felt like that he/she listened really deeply, and it reflected all of our needs. Now, we probably won't do it all at once. Maybe we'll phase it over time, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, do you think, Dan, that price is your only decision-making parameter?
No way. No way. No way. I'm sure you're going to get to pricing in the future, but we're talking about tone here. And your tone has to be dramatically different than the other guy. And that's the thing. Because all the other guys are just browbeating, they're presenting, they're authoritative, they're not listening. And if we can present initial relationship as curious, clarifying, probing, that level of share your clients share with you is the differentiating, unique selling proposition that you will have before you lay your first paper. You know what I'm saying? Before you even put a pen to paper, that has to be established. But and you know what? The thing with tone also, it takes an incredible amount of patience is what it does. It takes patience.
Yeah.
I'm going to share another tone lesson with the audience, if I could. And that is, it has to do with clarifying, but it's also based off of your skill, appropriate to ask for clarification on contradictions. Because sometimes your clients don't know what they want, right? So they may say something like, I want this vast space for my thing and blah, 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 blah. And then at the same, 5 minutes, they say, I want something cozy. So that's a contradiction, right? And as a designer, in your head, you're thinking, I can't make things vast and open and cozy at the same time, but maybe I can when you need clarification. So when you call your clients out on contradictions with tone, now watch this. One way to do it is, well, Mr. Jones, that makes no sense. You say you want big and vast, and now you want cozy. I'm confused. Like, you can't have one or not the other. Like, you're going to have to pick. So tell me what's up. It's one tone, right? Which you may be thinking. The other tone would be curious. Josh, you said you wanted big and vast, and then you also said you wanted cozy. What does that look like for you in the same space if you could have both of them? Curious. I got you. So that tone is calling your clients out on a contradiction because maybe they just don't know. They don't know, right? They don't know the logistics of the process, right? They shouldn't know the logistics of the process. So how do you call them out on a contradiction that may not be possible, right? So you can't, let's just say, I don't know the contradiction, but let's say you can't make a big space and a cozy space at the same time. Maybe you can, but I just say you can't. Now the clarifying question would be, I'm confused. What would that look like to have vast and cozy at the same time? Just, can you help me? What does that look like, right? Mm-hmm. And then they usually say, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I get what you're saying. Well, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Got it. Now that makes more sense. Understood. You want that. And wait a second. Cozy. I just want to get this down. Like, what does that look like for you specifically? If you're watching this on video, I'm actually pen to paper. I'm getting down exactly what they're saying. I want to. Yep. Oh, you want to feel like you're being hugged by 1,400 teddy bears? Great. Write that shit down, guys. Okay, write it down, because on presentation day, you're going to reference being hugged by 14,000 teddy bears. Okay. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit about clarification questions, tonality, all incredibly important stuff.
100%. And you also brought up another great point that we're going to finish this episode out with. It's the idea of listening and capturing their exact word fragments. They are putting together words because they have a picture in their head they're trying to put in your head through words, and they're carefully selecting words, like you had mentioned, the 1,400 teddy bears, right? They have in their mind this picture. Maybe it's not teddy bears. Maybe that's just the feeling they're getting from it. But if you just say, oh, so you want something really comfortable, like maybe deep seating, right? And that might be true, but that's not personalized to them. When you keep with their terminology, the 1,400 teddy bears, and you bring that back up when we do a process called up the ladder, when you bring that back later. So like, hey, you mentioned that during our call that you wanted a chair that made you feel like you were sitting within 1,400 teddy bears. Did I get that right? And they're like, Yes, it's exactly what I want. Instead of, oh, you want deep seating because I know what that means because I'm smarter than thou.
Right.
You disconnect. You disconnect that way. So by getting their exact words, penning them down during this phase, and writing them out exactly as they're, and I'm not someone who loves to take notes, to be quite honest with you. It annoys the hell out of me. But I will pick up on word fragments and on sentence fragments like that and be like, all right, that's what she or he is after. I'm going to capture that because that is the essence of what they're trying to that's their solution, the result they're looking for. If I can bring that to life in their words, there's a much higher probability that we're going to be able to serve this client in a way they need to be served so they can get what they want, need, and desire. And if I'm just trying to change it because I'm smarter, I'm the professional, I know that you don't pronounce pergola, so I'm going to correct them all the time.
Right.
I'm going to be the guy that says, you know what, you don't need a paver patio, because of this, this, and this. You need this. And they say, I've been wanting a paver patio since I was a little girl. Right. Like my grandparents had one of those, and I always remembered loving sitting out there listening to stories on my grandpa's lap. And that reminds me. And I said, one day when I buy a house, I'm going to be putting in a paver patio so I can do that with my kids. And you walk in as a contractor knowing because you're smarter than thou, no, you actually need stamped concrete, or we're not going to use those kinds of pavers. They're too old fashioned. We're going to use the new sleek modern ones because that's what I want.
Right.
Not listening.
Right.
That's where it's lost. You wonder why you're 3 out of 10? That's where it's lost. If we listen, we don't have an agenda. We're servants. We're listening. We're detectives. All of a sudden, where you think the conversation is going to go, it goes a completely different direction. And it's fascinating to me to watch that happen, to listen to that happen. I'm like, so you said comfortable and cozy outside. What does that mean for you, Mrs. Jones? And she goes off on a tangent about one time that she was in Costa Rica and they had these hanging chairs. And those hanging chairs, she saw her husband for the first time on this trip in that chair. And she wants those chairs in her backyard. And if I would have asked the question, I might have just gave her a couple of chairs from Sam's Club in the design because I wouldn't have known the difference. But what's the likelihood of you being able to serve that client when in that design are those same chairs and you put a woman sitting in one and a guy on the outside grilling or something, and you start putting them back in that moment? And it's like, this isn't psychology. This is just good listening, guys. It's all it is, listeners. It's just good listening. And when you can build that listening habit, it doesn't just work in sales. It works really well with your spouse, with your kids, with other business colleagues, with team members, with everybody you run into. If you become a curious detective, it changes the game and you learn so much more than you think you know.
Well said. Done. That's how it goes. Great stuff.
Well, guys, I hope you got a lot from this episode. Ultimately the lesson here is don't be a dictator, be a detective. Get down to that. Don't be afraid. In the last episode, we talked about STFU and the pregnant pause and just asking a question and just letting silence ring it out. You'll be surprised what clients say when you give them space to talk. It also shows that you have some self-control. If you're willing to ask a question and leave space for them to answer, it shows that you are a professional, not somebody who has to run really fast. Hey, what do you want outside? Comfortable and cozy? I know what that means. Next. Slow it down. See half the people, spend twice the time with them. It'll change your closing rate. I guarantee it. And you're going to learn a lot along the way, not just about your clients, but about yourself. So if you want to, you can put your phone in your pocket, go in and do your sales pitch with your client, asking good questions, and then send it out to us. We'd love to hear and see if we can help you in that. We all constantly are improving. Dan's improving every day. I'm improving every day. We get the blessing and the privilege of helping others fast track that through teaching our sales processes to our industries. And we'd be glad to do a free evaluation for what you guys are actually doing out there. So anything we can do to help, again, my goal, 75% closing rate. I can't do it alone. I need every one of you guys out there to help in that journey because I want to see you more home with your families, making more money, on vacations, living life, and not chasing after bum leads because we just don't know any better. So, Dan, any other closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think you did a great job with that. Hang out here for the best, man. This guy knows what he's doing, man. So exciting for you guys.
Thank you, Dan. That's very kind. Next week, guys, we're going to be talking about why you aren't closing 10 out of 10 of your sales calls and what to do about it. So thank you for tuning in. See you next week.